Good morning, good morning, good morning. Or should I say good afternoon for those of you who are checking in with us in the afternoon? Or should I say good evening because I know a couple of you are doing your work at nighttime. Today we're going to take a closer look at day 2 for our social issues unit for the second portion, the second half of it. And I'm going to teach you some cool new reading moves for today. Today our learning target is, read it with me on 3. 1, 2, 3. I can examine the short-term and long-term effects of power imbalances between groups. So we're going to look at how the power shifts in between different groups and how that affects people immediately and how that affects people over a period of time. So what we're doing today is first you're watching this lovely screencast. The mentor text is inside out. Feel free to click right there where it's blue, right here, and you can follow along. You're going to need your student digital journal for Ben 2, not Ben 1's, Ben 2's digital journal, and then you'll be reading chapter 10 in The Breadwinner. If you're in the graphic novel, you'll be reading the next 10 pages. So today's reading move is a pink one, and it says, analyze power imbalances between groups and their effects. Expect this to shift in different settings. So I know that can be totally confusing, so let me try to break it down with like a real life example. Let's say you have a neighbor. You two grew up next door to each other. You play outside every day. Elementary school, you were best buds, and then middle school happened. All of a sudden, your neighbor's acting different, and they sit with the quote-unquote cool kids at lunch. So at school, your neighbor acts like they don't even know you. But when you're at home, they're ringing on your doorbell and they're like, hey, you want to play catch? Want to bake cookies together? Because of the different settings being at school and at home, the power imbalance literally changes. And this happens in the books that we're reading all the time, as well as in our real life. So I just want to go over some things that social groups can be based off of, because today you're going to be identifying different social groups and how those power imbalances play out. It can be based off of gender. Are they male, female, cisgender? How do they identify themselves as? It can be based off of their language community. Do they speak Spanish at home? Do they speak English? Do they speak Patois? What is their language community at home and at school? It can be based off of the socioeconomic status. How much money do these people have? People who are below the poverty line, and then you have people who are way above the poverty line. It could be based off of their interests. What are their hobbies? Do they like playing basketball and baseball and soccer? Do they like baking and cooking and watering plants and maintaining a beautiful garden? It can be based off of race and ethnicity. Are they Latino, Latinx? Are they Black, African American, European, Caucasian, Hispanic? It can be based off of their age and birth order. In many households, the oldest sibling has different responsibilities than the youngest sibling. The oldest person in a family has a different opinion than the youngest person in a family. Is it based off of religion? Are they Jewish? Are they Christian? Are they Catholic? Is it based off of the family structure? Do quote-unquote girls have certain roles to do and quote-unquote boys have other roles to do? It can be based off of their sexual orientation, how they identify themselves as. And it could be based off of ability. It could be physical or mental. What are they capable of doing? So today, we're going to be thinking about power imbalances between groups. First, we're going to be thinking about a group. We could feel free to go back to that previous slide and use it as a list of different group options that you can be using. And then we need to ask ourselves, where is there an imbalance of power for this specific group? And we're going to find it, and then we're going to really think about it. After you've found the power imbalance, this part is usually really easy to do because you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Something's off here. But the next part requires us to dig deeper. What might the effects of the power imbalance be? We have to think about the short-term and the long-term effects. What does that look like? What does that sound like? And that requires us to really think. So now let's take a closer look using our mentor text. with Francisco. I just want to read these last few paragraphs as a refresher, and then we'll talk about what's happening. Let's take a deep breath. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. I sat at my desk and ran my hand over its wooden top. It was full of scratches and dark, almost black ink spots. I opened the top, and inside were a book, a box of crayons, a yellow ruler, a thick pencil, a pair of scissors. To my left, under the windows, was a dark wooden counter, the length of the room. On top of it, right next to my desk, was a caterpillar in a large jar. It looked just like the ones I had seen in the fields. It was yellowish green with black bands, and it moved very slowly, without making any sound. I was about to put my hand in the jar to touch the caterpillar when the bell rang. All the kids lined up outside the classroom door and then walked in quietly and took their seats. Some of them looked at me and giggled. Embarrassed and nervous, I looked at the caterpillar in the jar. I did this every time someone looked at me. Miss Scalapino started speaking to the class, and I did not understand a word she was saying. The more she spoke, the more anxious I became. By the end of the day, I was very tired of hearing Miss Scalapino talk because the sounds made no sense to me. I thought that perhaps by paying close attention, I would begin to understand, but I did not. I only got a headache. For that night, when I went to bed, I heard her voice in my head. For days, I got headaches from trying to listen until I learned a way out. When my head began to hurt, I let my mind wander. Sometimes I imagined myself flying out of the classroom and over the fields where Papa worked and landing next to him and surprising him. But when I daydreamed, I continued to look at the teacher and pretend I was paying attention because Papa told me it was disrespectful not to pay attention, especially to grown-ups. So now we're going to think about a group that a character is a part of. And when we think about Francisco and what he's going through, we know that he comes from the Hispanic community, and we know that he speaks Spanish and he's extremely fluent in Spanish. But when he's at school, the teacher's speaking English. So right here, the social group and the effects, we know that this group that Francisco is a part of is the Spanish-speaking community, and he's being compared to the English-speaking community. And what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the group that is experiencing the power imbalance. So now we're going to write about the short-term effects that this has on Francisco. So because Francisco can't really understand what his teacher is saying, it's going to prevent him from being as successful as he can be in school. You know, it's going to prevent him from progressing to be the best version of himself because he literally cannot understand what the teacher is saying. And the quote that I pull for my piece of textual evidence says, Miss Scalapino started speaking to the class and I did not understand a word she was saying. The more she spoke, the more anxious I became. Now we have to think about a long-term effect. You know, if this short-term thing that's happening to Francisco keeps happening for a period of time and it keeps repeating itself, what is that going to do to Francisco in the long term? And what we came up with is that Francisco's self-esteem is crushed, or he feels like he is incapable of learning. You know, every day he comes into school and every day he's not getting it, he's going to think that it's something wrong with him. And he's not going to have the confidence that he usually has whenever he's back at home in his previous school. And the quote that I used to support that says, by the end of the day, I was very tired of hearing Miss Scalapino talk because the sounds made no sense to me. I thought that perhaps by paying close attention, I would begin to understand, but I did not. And if he's feeling this way over and over at the end of every single day, he's going to start not trying to pay attention at all. And he's going to feel like he can't learn anything. So today, you're going to do this same exact work using the breadwinner. The directions say, using the chart below, to examine the short-term and long-term effects of a power imbalance for two groups in the breadwinner. Highlight the group that is experiencing the power imbalance. Be sure to cite textual evidence, direct quotes to support your thinking. So here we have the social groups that's being affected. You're going to think of one group that's being affected, and then you're going to think of another group that's being affected. You're going to think about Parvana and her family. What's happening there? What's happening with the Taliban? What are the short-term effects? You know, this is almost like what's happening immediately. And then find a piece of textual evidence to support it. And then what are the long-term effects? What is this experience going to do to Parvana 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? And you're going to do this work for 2 different groups. Remember that you need to highlight the group that you're writing about. But something else that I want you to keep in mind is that the power imbalance can be happening in several different places. It doesn't always have to be between 2 different groups. This is the one that we're most familiar with because we think, okay, it has to be 2 totally, completely different people. It could also be happening to 2 people, one-on-one. You know, take a look at Parvana and the relationship that she has with her siblings. What is the power imbalance there? Or it can be between an outsider, one person, and a group of people. Is that one person more powerful than the group? Is that group more powerful than one person? Or it could be happening to people in the same group. There can be one person that's a part of the same group as everybody else who's always hungry for power. So really take your time with this work today. You have to really dive deep and think deeply and really analyze what is happening. Think about everything that has happened so far in the story, from beginning to where we're at now. You know, go back and reread certain parts. Read the chapter for today and see how all of these power imbalances are coming out to play with one another. And please, my friends, remember that if you need any help, reach out to your teachers. We are here. We are happy. We are willing to help. We will set up Google Meets with you. We will respond to emails as soon as possible. Reach out to us earlier in the day. The earlier, the better. Have a wonderful day. We know you'll do great. Bye-bye.